Well, good evening, everybody. Let me call to order the Historical Architecture Review Board meeting of February 8th, 2021. And it is 6:08 p.m. And we have a quorum, so we shall proceed. There might be a member or two joining a little later. And if we have someone in the waiting room, John, I believe.
Bringing them in now.
Then we should probably move along with functional stuff and leave the approval of minutes till the end. So I'd like to welcome DC Troilo and hopefully have a little discussion with him about the revisions to his plan for the point. And welcome, DC.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, yes, I am back with another version of the point. After taking your advice from the last meeting and going to our architect, as you may have noted, you see that site diagram number 12. So we did it about 8 more configurations till we came up with this one. And again, no engineering has been done. This is just for direction and to see if this is something you guys might be inclined to look favorably upon. So we moved the houses, the townhouses or the units to the streets, both Yardley Langhorne and Edgewood Road. We put the parking towards the back. We put some parking over by the ice cream store or whatever retail use the point house would be. The feeling is that if it is a retail establishment or some sort of business, that it'd be easier to rent if it had its own parking as opposed to competing with the tenants for parking, though none of the parking would be specifically dedicated to either. So there it is, and we're looking for your input.
Okay, members, this is your opportunity to have a input and influence on how this proceeds. So please feel free. Speak up. Luma, do you?
Yeah, I'm still waiting for this to broadcast on Facebook or the township. Still not appearing.
Okay, you're looking for the sketch and that hasn't come up yet?
Yeah, I don't have your guys broadcast on Zoom. Well, I can offer what my opinion will be on this. I'm really happy that the 2 buildings, the 2 existing buildings are preserved, and the proposed construction is lining up the streets, creating that Edgewood Village feeling. Now, my thought would be looks a little too dense, too many units for that area. So my suggestions would be, and I really haven't discussed this with anybody else at the HARP committee, but it would be say if we start with that building next to the Quail House in the north, and this is just my opinion, I would line up with the Quail House to create more of a continuous visual perspective from Edgewood, and also rather than having 4 units there, I would have something similar to the Quail House, 1 building, maybe with 2 apartments. Now going to the other side, again, rather than presenting this whole large expanse of townhouses, and this again, this is my my suggestion only. I would think that maybe the two top buildings, it could be a duplex with 4 units. Then we could leave a space open in between that and the next building, and that could be just a single building with 2 apartments, which could be moved a little bit up higher, and it wouldn't be so restricted. It's like so tight there between that edge of that last proposed building and the quail house is really like almost on top of each other. So that would be a little more generous space there, for the parking and crossing. And also those buildings would have the spirit of how the Edgewood Village was, which was more single homes. And the proportions would reflect that a little bit. But otherwise, I think it's the right direction, and it really, I think it's really a great progress. That's it.
Very fine. Jeff or?
PT, there's only one in and out to this complex?
Correct. We're trying to avoid using Yardley Langhorne Road because it's a state road and it brings in PennDOT. So it complicates matters. Where Edgewood is a township road, we just have to deal with the township. There is some with PennDOT, but Yardley Langhorne has much more involved with it.
That long stretch of that parking lot backs up with Dr. Semino's driveway?
Yes.
But the unaligned with Luba, with the big building on Yardley Langhorne, is it possible to break that up and make it, or not even so much break it up, but there's no facade or anything there, so to make it look like it blends more in with the village?
Yeah.
As opposed to an apartment building.
Again, this is just kind of for presentation. We haven't even thought about what the buildings would look like or anything like that. And obviously there are all the guidelines in the TND overlay that would have to be followed, and it would have to look like it has to follow the historic guidelines, which down the road obviously we'd have to start developing that and appear before you. But yes, I mean, so the thought is to make it look like more single family homes, but have 1 and 2 bedroom units in it. They're not going to be huge apartments, and they would look more like single family homes or townhomes.
Right.
Not in no way looking like an apartment building.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be great.
Well, if I may add my 2 cents, or as much as you're willing to pay for it anyway. I agree wholeheartedly with Luba about the maintaining a setback along Edgewood Road, in particular with the house that's there. I think you can adjust the parameters of how that, let's call it a duplex, is put together. And similar to the way that the duplexes over on Stony Hill Road are, that you can still get a couple of sizable floors of either single units or double units on the floors that you will be developing. And I agree as well with the idea of breaking up the mass of the one along Yardley Langhorne Road to maintain a situation that is similar to the other Edgewood Village buildings that have that line the street all the way through to the 95 overpass. All these little units, residential style, and whether they can eventually be used for commercial as well on the first floor is up to the developer. I think, having something that is similar to what they're doing across the street, say the skateboard shop, have that come in on the ground floor. It's certainly a reasonable utilization of the real estate. So that's my opinion. For what it's worth, I think this is certainly a great movement in the right direction, and I agree with Luba that we very much appreciate that you're maintaining the existing buildings that are there, and the historic fabric can be enhanced by adding to it, not necessarily replacing it. Have we gotten Jennifer yet, or I haven't seen?
I'm here. I was a little bit late.
Okay.
I was thrilled when I saw this recasting. It really is starting to get to the spirit of where we're headed. If there's not enough room here for footprint to separate the 4 units, I would look for at least undulating the fronts so that your setbacks change unit to unit to give it more distinctive character.
Okay.
That's the only thing I would add to what everybody else has said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Do you have any more specific questions, TC, or anything
No.
that you would like to say in response to our comments?
I appreciate you taking a look at it and letting us know what you think. Procedurally wise, am I allowed to ask a question about a different project?
If we can wrap this up, I think we could call it yes. Another.
It's just a quick question. Last
Discussion,
time
sure.
when I presented the restaurant, I kind of thought that we got positive feedback, and I'm just confirming that in that we're gonna advance and start doing some real drawings and stuff like that. And I just wanted to make sure that, after thinking about it, that everyone was still kind of on board with the direction we were going. And I know it's not a vote and it's not binding and it's not, and if you can't say anything, that's fine
Well,
too.
procedurally, let me respond by saying Jim could certainly make available to you the minutes of that meeting, and
Okay.
you can review what we said. I think in general it was very positive, and it would be a good idea to utilize the thoughts, especially some of the ones in terms of the finishes and the
Yep.
way to formulate the spaces that came up during our discussion. So please, yes, proceed. Sketch type of plan at this point would be very much appreciated.
Okay, that's great. That's super. I should have saw that myself. Sorry.
Jim, you'll take care of that then?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
I'm good if your guys are all good.
Fine. So if that wraps up our discussions with TC, we wish him the best in this snowy weather.
You all as well.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
So, John, do we have a presenter for the next item of business?
No, we'll have a presenter on number 5. On
In
the
that case,
Rite Aid property.
In that case, I will share my screen just to go over what Mr. Miller had presented. As you're aware, he was looking at taking the area between where the skate shop is on the north side of Yardley Langhorne Road, all the way down where his house is near the corner of Mirror Lake Road, and trying to fill that in with likewise houses. You can see on the photo up top, you can see that area in here. It should be noted that this area from about where this telephone pole is all the way down to probably where the end of the screen is near this telephone pole that is all township-owned land that is subject to an agricultural easement held by the county for the Patterson Farm. So that would require first the concurrence of our Board of Supervisors, and also we'd have to amend our easement that we have with the county to relieve that in order to try to do anything such as subdividing it or do anything like that. And I think Mr. Miller's vision, sort of shown on this little rendering that he did, where he cut out pictures of houses and placed them in that area. And you could see where he's sort of showing between those houses, adding in a bunch of houses to be more like a village type of atmosphere. And there is ample opportunity for some of this stuff to happen. It's just a matter of the logistics of it. And I'll share my screen one more time just to show on an aerial photo what this area looks like. And you could see on the photo that I just shared, here's where the skate shop is. Here are the two houses in the point in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. Up in the upper right part of the screen, you can see Mr. Miller's house is right where my cursor is now. He has a barn over to the west or to the left of that. So he has room on his property to put some buildings up along the road. He also owns the property just to the west of that, where my cursor is now. And then there's another vacant property in this area that a house was there that had burned down a number of years ago. And then here's the part that's township property, this whole area in here, all the woods that is subject to an agricultural easement. So that's the essence of Mr. Miller's ideas.
Right. I think it's very clear what we've been offered as a proposal. And I think the only thing that we could do at this point is wait till there is some feedback from the county, unless there is some desire to send a kind of a consensus of the HARB as to what we would like the township to consider, an effort that we would like them to undertake to maybe actualize and realize the vision that has been presented to us. Having a portion of woods that is never going to be agricultural by any means, changed and utilized for the benefit of the village and the township in general, would be certainly, I think, something that would be valuable to proceed with, to at least look at offering to a developer to pull it all together and come up with some designs that we can consider. Is there any input from the other members, or maybe even offer a motion that we can discuss to send to the supervisors?
Stephen, can I ask you a question? Sorry.
Oh, Mr. Grenier, nice to see you.
Yeah. So, and Jim, I don't know if, sorry, I had to work a little late here today, but Jim, I don't know if you brought this up, but since this is township owned land, if the township wanted to go through with anything similar to this, it would, because it's publicly owned land, would probably have to go through a bidding process where other developers would also have the opportunity to bid on something like this. And it wouldn't just be Mr. Miller's idea that would get done. There are, as you know, there are other developers even in this neighborhood that would probably jump at the chance for an opportunity to do something like this. If we sent something like this to the EAC, on the other hand, as an example, they would probably, there may be a few people that disagree strongly with the idea that taking forested lands out of conservation was a good idea, even if it might add a few businesses. So I think this is something that is very early in the process, is very conceptual at best at this point. And, I don't even know if Mr. Miller's even spoken to anyone at the township about the various hurdles and requirements to go through this process that they would do. So I'm a little concerned that this is very, very early in the process to send anything to the board. I certainly wouldn't be ready to vote on anything like this anytime soon without having gone through a much more detailed review as a board member.
Jennifer, you looked like you had something to say.
I do, because I've experienced with historic easements and development stipulations, and I think that this is a prime example where something like that kind of vehicle is very appropriate, because we would certainly, if we have to go to competitive bidding, we want to have a very strict set of guidelines as to what would be acceptable. And as the owner of the property, the township has the right to impose that kind of requirement on any transaction that would be considered. So Daniel, to piggyback on what you said, yeah, there are a lot of components that need to be worked out. And I think that generally the hard, at least my opinion is, I think this is an interesting concept, but it's very complex. That's it.
I'd agree. Thank you.
Anybody else? Comments? A motion? Or how can we proceed?
Steve, I'd recommend having Mr. Miller go schedule something with Mr. Ferguson and maybe Mr. Majewski to talk about what he's thinking of, and then so that he can then better understand the process, because it doesn't read like I'll be blunt, it doesn't seem like he's done that yet, nor does he totally understand that process. So I wouldn't want him to spend a lot of time and money doing anything if he hasn't even done that yet. Because that's a very important step.
Oh, I would get the impression that what he's doing is suggesting to Harb, and through Harb, the township, to maybe pull together a package that we can offer to developers as a redevelopment of land that could actually benefit the historic district. And we can impose at this point then some kind of restrictions and guidelines, and end up getting what will be beneficial to the village as a whole. So I think it would be valuable to have some research done on what can be done, and having just land that's available always allows developers to come in and put Wegmans into a big piece of property. But I think we are looking for something a little more of a different kind of scale. And if we want to do that, it doesn't necessarily have to be anything that Dave Miller wants to control even. I think he's just suggesting a way to say capitalize on what we've already done. So if you, perhaps as our liaison with the Board of Supervisors, want us to kind of put together something similar to what Dave has done, maybe somebody like Luba and I, who have some free time, might be able to put together a kind of a schematic and say, this is what it could be. I'm sure Luba has loved to do that, since she did such a fine job on the point. So, any other input? Kathleen. Jeff?
No, good.
I've got a question, though. I think there's still some more due diligence to do with this property. I believe that there's a creek going through it, or some water. So I think that there's wetlands that need to be delineated, and we need to see how much is actually buildable. Then there's the environmental impact that we have to look at. So there's more study to do. I don't want you to waste too much time doing concepts if you're placing structures where they can't go. All
important considerations. if there's no motion, I don't think we can, proceed in a formal fashion. I think if you want to take back the consensus of our discussions, we can ask Mr. Miller if he would like to be further involved and come up with some kind of formal presentation, but I suspect that he's going to demur.
Jennifer, I couldn't tell if that was you speaking. I apologize, but there is a stream mapped right through the middle of the forested area here. I'm looking at some. This is what I do. I do the environmental reviews and all that stuff.
Well, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, as you couldn't tell. So it bisects the area. I didn't look up FEMA to see if there's a floodplain in there, but I wouldn't be all that surprised.
Right.
So to use the term that I would typically use, constraints mapping of the area may prove to make this quite a difficult site.
Right.
I haven't done a full-on review of it yet, but that's what it's looking like.
For small-scale housing and other types of buildings along the road, I think we could work around something that might otherwise, for a commercial prospect, be a little more difficult. But I'm asking, as the liaison with the Board of Supervisors, what you think they would need in order to kind of have direct the township manager or the planning or whoever or other people might be involved in finding out the limitations of what we can do with the easement that's been imposed.
Well, I would recommend that anyone that's interested in developing this area, because it's not I don't know that it's the policy of the board to try and remove conservation or agricultural easements from lands that are already there. That's quite the effort in and of itself. I would, just knowing the board, I would say that anyone that might have an interest in that, whether it's Mr. Miller or anyone else, I'll just reiterate what I said before, is to have that discussion with the township manager, who would more than likely rely heavily on Mr. Majewski, as he should, to provide some more background information in terms of the limitations of the easement itself, any land use and zoning restrictions, any information that we might have. I don't know if there's ever been a full-scale assessment of the site, Jim, but any natural resources information we might have, any constraints mapping we might have for the Patterson Farm that would play into this, in addition to our woodlands ordinances and everything else, to show what, if any, there would be for developable area, and then what that footprint could look like. But even before we would ever get to that point, we'd have to see if the board had, the township had any appetite for considering this in the first place before all of that other stuff gets done. And I haven't heard from that. This has not been something that the board has been overly anxious to do anytime soon. We're actually trying to increase our preserved areas versus decrease for development. So I would have anyone interested to actually speak to Mr. Ferguson as a first step, and then he can bring that back to the board. Since that's a matter, I believe that's something we would probably discuss up front to see if there's any interest at an executive session would typically be the case, and then go from there if there is some level of interest.
Okay, well, since we are not a planning board, since we are a review board of plans that are brought to us, it would be probably inconsistent to start doing all kinds of design on our own. So if we can send a consensus, kind of idea of how the board feels about this kind of thing through you, since we can take an informal poll and say, this would be very well supported by the board, or we can see all kinds of problems and don't particularly want to do it. Those are two options, I guess. But we I don't think, can do the planning other than in response to similar to what Luba did on the point.
No, and I wouldn't expect you all to do the planning, nor would I expect the planning commission to do the planning, even though they're planning in the name, right? I would say that again, if there's any interest from any entity in doing that, I don't think this board needs to say yay or nay or provide any direction. I think they just go talk to Mr. Ferguson, who, at some point you might have a plan to review if any individuals decide to move forward with it, or if the township decides that, hey, yeah, we'd like to sell off a conservation easement or an ag easement through the bidding process. At that point, I think that's when it would come back to this board for a formal review, versus Mr. Miller or anyone else just saying, hey, I have this idea. Can you guys put on your agenda to look at it? It would be a formal project that comes before the township, and it would go in front of the planning board, would go in front of the EAC, it would come here, obviously, and Citizens Traffic and probably a few others that typically review these things, in addition to Mr. Majewski and our township engineer and traffic engineer and everyone, police department, all those folks, like any other land development process.
I kind of feel like this was the very, very early litmus test, just to see if this had any legs at all. And if we just look at it in that kind of realm, my opinion is, I think this has some legs, and I would love to see what are the complexities ahead of looking at this further, with the environmental, with the easement, with the restrictions we talk about we'd have to impose on it. Would it still even be marketable and be financially viable for anybody to consider developing it if we put so many restrictions on it that you couldn't do anything that would give you an ROI? Stuff like that. But that's way down the road. But if Dave just wanted to find out if his idea was so far out in left field that it was like he was a Martian, then that's what I felt like he wanted back from us, feedback. And that's where, Steve, I think we could say yay or nay to exploring further. This is like 1% of the 100% project.
Okay, if there are any brief comments from the other members, we could consider them and then table the matter until we get some more, let's say, formal presentation. I would like to do that at this point. Any of the other board members like to have, because we have about 20 minutes till we have it stop.
Yeah, I would totally second what Dan said and Jennifer. But I do feel that the concept has some merit in terms of enhancing the village look, mostly now that we are developing the point, having those structures there, it would create sort of a balance and more of a village feeling. So, I do think it has some merit, but not totally agree and follow with what Dan said and Jennifer, that it's just the very beginning of a proposal.
Jeff, Kathleen?
Unmute.
You're muted, Kathleen. There you go.
Sorry. Yeah. So I concur with Jennifer. I think that we're at the initial stages, and we have to see if it's something that you actually can build on, and before we kind of keep going with this. But it certainly, would enhance the village, and but it has to make sense for the business people as well.
Okay, can I have a motion to table this, or we just move along, I would say, because it hasn't been something that we've been asked to actually rule on. So let's move along to the next order of business, if I may.
This is for the Rite Aid that came in not too long ago. If they can bring them into the meeting. They're basically changing the prior recommendation by Harb for approval to change some stuff. So I believe they're coming in now.
Jerry has been moved in. He just needs to hit *6 to unmute.
Yeah, okay. Am I on?
Yes, please proceed, and we'll be happy to hear from what you have to say.
Yeah, okay. And it's for the sign, at this Rite Aid location. And we had been before the board previously. At that time, the presentation involved changing the color of the Rite Aid. I don't know whether you have access to the drawing that was previously approved.
Yes, we do.
Okay, good. Yeah, and they were going to go with that light gray. March Wind is the name. And when they go to that color scheme, the sign goes to the blue and the green. Blue Rite and green Aid. And it was all well and good, and you guys approved. We thank you. And then someone within Rite Aid's corporate design, so I don't know where it came from, but they said, no, we don't want the gray here. We want to be in keeping with the rest of the shopping center and stay with the colors that are out there. When they go back to that color, the blue and the green don't work anymore because of the color contrast. The medium red, dark red, with the blue and the green, they're not that visible. So we went back to the white Rite Aid letters, which they had previously, on the storefront, and they kept the logo, which pulls in the blue and the green, but it has large fields of white and a white outline that allow it to stand out and be visible, and yet convey their the new look of the new Rite Aid.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask that we have a motion to accept it as presented so we can move along and finish up in our time frame that we've been allotted? Anybody?
I'll make a motion to accept as presented.
Okay.
Second.
Second? Okay, Luba, second.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any comments from the members?
No comment.
Jennifer?
No, I was just being silent to mean no comment.
Okay. Jeff? Kathleen?
No comment.
Okay. I would have to say that I believe that there's some amelioration of the problems that I foresaw in the siding and all that that I think we did discuss when you brought this up. So I think that this is a positive move on the part of Rite Aid Corporate, and I support it too. So without further ado, I guess we have to allow for public comment. John?
No public comment.
Okay, can I call for a vote on this motion to accept? All in favor? Please,
Yeah.
aye.
Aye.
Approved unanimously. So, is it Jerry? I guess.
Yeah, Jerry.
Okay. You have an answer, hopefully swiftly taken, but I think in general, everybody certainly understands the move to do what you've done. So Thank you for presenting it. And I think, Mr. Majewski, you'll have a little direction on what they need to do in order to finalize this approval.
This recommendation will go in front of the Board of Supervisors at the next meeting on February 17th for the board to act on the recommendation of approval.
Thank you.
Okay, so we still go back to the Board of Supervisors at that meeting then.
Yes, that's the process.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, beautiful. Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Good evening.
And okay, and I'll sign you off. Okay, great. Thank you.
So we still need to consider the minutes for the last meeting. Has everybody had a chance to review them?
Yes.
Okay, can I have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting, whatever date that was.
Thank you, Jennifer. A second?
I'll second it.
Second.
Okay, so Jeff was first in that race to approve the second. So,
You can have it, that's fine.
any other notes or comments? Mr. Grenier, did you have a chance to review it? Did you see anything we missed?
No, I think you're okay.
Okay,
I do.
thank you for, okay.
Stephen, real quick.
Sure.
I'm not sure if, is this board going to review any of, and this may be for Mr. Majewski here, does this board have to review any of the items at Prickett Preserve? I know they're planning to come in front of the Board of Supervisors. Just a matter of, just for your information for this board, they did get preliminary and final site plan approval from the Planning Commission at the 25th meeting, I think was the date. So their next round will be in front of the Board of Supervisors. That's not scheduled yet. And they do have two buildings on site, obviously, that are of historical interest. I believe one of them may be eligible, and I think they're working with PHMC / the SHPO soon, or currently, I should say, on those items. But
Well, can we address this as other business and finish up on our minutes, and then?
Oh, sure.
Because I think there might be other comments that might be made concerning.
Oh, I thought you had voted already.
No, we haven't had a formal vote. So all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, unanimously approved. So now, if we can get back to you, sorry, Dan.
No, that's fine. Process is important. So yeah, under other business, I just giving this group a heads up about the status of the Prickett Preserve project. I know everyone's interested, especially since it's nearby, and there are historic buildings there. The Prickett, and Mr. Majewski probably knows more detail than I do on the process here, but they did receive their preliminary and final site plan approval, recommendation for approval, I should say, from the Planning Commission, with a few waiver items recommended for approval and one or two that were not, mostly related to trees, if I recall. And they did mention the two buildings, the barn and the house, which I really want to see that barn. I've heard amazing things about that barn. I haven't been in there yet. But they're due to come in front of the Board of Supervisors next once they've addressed some items. Again, I don't know that they've set that yet. There may be a sort of interim meeting or presentation to the board in terms of a status update that would be public so everyone could see it. But in terms of overall process that may need to be completed, I'm wondering if it's more about the building permit process where this group would get involved versus the planning site plan approval process when this group would get involved with input on the overall design of some of the buildings, et cetera.
Well, certainly your concern is good to be brought up at this point. I think the sooner that we have become involved in plans, the better. But I think the overall understanding has to be made at the very beginning, similar to what they did when we became responsible for the Giant Shopping Center and McCaffrey's Shopping Center. Those were not as part of the historic village per se, but we were assigned as part of the agreement, I believe, for the approval of the subdivision that was added. The language was added actually to the subdivision documents. And I think, Jim, you would probably have to explain more about that process. But
is that the case here?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
I just cut to the chase. We're running out of time. Is that the case here? Is the only reason why HARP would be involved is if we were put in?
Right. If we were assigned it specifically, then we could deal with it similar to what we did with McCaffrey. At least that's my understanding. But Jim, you have any comments?
As part of the ordinance amendment for the mixed use overlay ordinance, they made HARB a party to any modifications to historic buildings that they're looking to take credit for preserving. So in this instance, they want to take credit as part of their project for preserving the house and the barn. So any exterior alterations to those would need to go in front of HARB.
Great. Okay.
Great. So, Dan, I hope that answers your question, but I would say the sooner the better to become involved in looking at the process and reviewing and having some commentary, because once they're already set about size and shape and where they're going to be, heights of buildings and things like that are certainly things that are part of the historic guidelines for the village. And if that's the criterion that we're supposed to go for, or some other kind of overlay, we should know about that up front. So any other comments?
Well, the criteria actually are for the two buildings. It's not for all of the buildings in the area.
Yeah, it's just.
Although I'm sure you've seen the renderings that have been posted. If not, I could send it to everyone so you can see what they're looking at as far as the other buildings. And I know when we went on our site walk, they talked about, the addition they were looking to put in the barn. We haven't seen any plans on that yet, but I will ask them to see if they have any preliminary information that they could forward to HARB so you guys can start your preliminary assessment and guide them in the right direction. I know at the meeting, Steve had made a few suggestions to them about the stone and the facade and the exterior and how the thing would look, and I think that was pretty positive in their viewpoint.
Any other comments, Jeff, Kathleen, Luma? All right. We have about a few minutes left, but I guess what I would ask if, Jim, you could do what you just suggested and pass along to us the presentations that have been made on style of buildings, et cetera. I think that would be a help at this point to help us familiarize ourselves with what the conditions are that they're expecting to go with. Let's see. If there's no other items to consider, Jim?
No, we do need to get information from all the members as far as if everyone took any continuing education courses. If not, I know a few of you weren't able to do that, but we'll try to line some stuff up as soon as possible so that we can get that for everyone. And to those who already sent me the information, I appreciate that. And also just let you know, Steve, if we do need to go past the 7:00 witching hour, it's not a hard deadline set in stone. If we really need to go a little bit beyond that for talking, it is okay. But I appreciate you trying to keep the meetings, give me a break in between.
Okay, well, since we have completed all of our business, I think in order to, a motion to adjourn would be considered appropriate.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, a second there?
Second.
Okay. Thank you, Luba. I think.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all tonight. I believe that a motion and a second for motion to adjourn usually means, without exception, we would then adjourn at 6:55, 6:56. And the best to all of you, and thanks for your cooperation tonight and moving things along. Appreciate it. Good night.
Thank you.
Yeah,
good night.